The television flickered once. Not because it was broken, but because it was old. One of those wood-paneled RCA consoles from the late 80s, still sitting in the corner of my living room like a relic. I don't know why I stopped to watch that night. I hadn't turned the thing on in years. But something about the static, the way it shimmered like it remembered something I didn't. It held me still. I didn't know it yet, but my whole life, everything I thought was mine was about to come undone. Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from down in the comments. And if stories like this have ever brushed past your own family, tap that like and subscribe. Every click helps bring another forgotten name into the light. My name is Clare Jensen. I'm 42 years old, and I've lived in Helena, Montana since I was 11. I work the front desk at Dr. Levine's dental clinic off 6th Avenue. Patients know me by my calm voice. My drawer labels my habit of tucking pens into the same ceramic cup. It's not an exciting life, but it's mine. Simple, predictable, the kind of quiet I've always believed meant safe. I live alone now in a pale blue ranch-style house on the edge of town. Paul passed away 3 winters ago, heart failure, and after that, things got even quieter. I never married, never had kids. My co-workers say I'm private, maybe too much so. But I just like things neat. I like knowing where everything is when it's supposed to happen and why. That night had been cold early spring wind tapping at the windows like it had somewhere to be. I had just finished dinner grilled cheese and tomato soup and was rinsing the plate when I caught movement in the screen's corner. Grainy footage, a local news segment, some high school marching band at a county fair 2 towns over. Nothing remarkable. Except for the woman. She wasn't part of the event. She stood in the background near the edge of the frame. Beige coat scarf wrapped tight hands clasped in front of her. She wasn't waving or smiling or doing anything unusual. She just stood there. Still. Like she didn't belong. Like she was waiting for something. Her face turned slightly from the camera, but not enough to hide it completely. I don't know how long I stared. Long enough for the credits to roll and the screen to go black. I didn't feel afraid, just unsettled. Not by her, but by the quiet weight in my chest, like something had brushed too close. I didn't think about it again until later that week, 5 days later to be exact. That's when I saw the comment, buried in a re-upload of the news clip, time-stamped and casual. Is it just me, or does the woman at 142 look exactly like Clare Markham, the girl who went missing in Boulder back in '88? I didn't recognize the name. I should have. But at the time, I just sat there on the couch, my cat curled beside me, the room dim except for the glow of the laptop screen. Outside, the wind had picked up. Something creaked softly in the wall behind me, maybe the vent, maybe something else. The comment didn't scare me. Not yet. But it would. At first, I didn't think much of it. A comment on a grainy news clip wasn't enough to send my life into a tailspin. But something lingered. The way the woman in that beige coat stood quiet, unbothered, like she'd blended into the crowd for so long it had just become second nature. I didn't go back to it right away. I went about my week like I always did. Fed the cat, answered phones at the clinic, restocked tongue depressors. I told myself it was nothing. But then, Friday came. I was checking emails before bed, same as usual, when I saw something had slipped into my spam folder. The subject line read, "Please read. I think I know who you are." It had no sender name. Just a link to that same local news video. Below it, one line. 142, that's you. I was your neighbor in 1988. My finger hovered over the mouse for a moment before I clicked. Same clip. Marching band local reporter families clapping along a parade route, and in the background, me. Same scarf, same coat, same posture. I hadn't been to that event, not that I remembered, but there I was, caught in the blur of someone else's memory. What struck me wasn't the footage. It was the scar. Someone in the comments section had mentioned it. Said you could see it if you looked closely. Left arm near the elbow. I pushed up my sleeve. It was there. A curved scar, faint but permanent. I always assumed I'd gotten it falling off my bike when I was a kid. Only, I didn't remember the fall. I didn't remember much of anything before I turned 10. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed on the couch with a blanket wrapped around my legs, staring at nothing. Morning came, and I still hadn't moved. By the time I got to work, I was running on caffeine and nerves. Every noise felt louder than usual. The overhead lights buzzed like insects. The drill from exam room 3 sent something sharp straight up my spine. Even the name on my badge, Claire Jensen, looked wrong. Too official, too precise. That evening, I pulled out the oldest photo album in the house. Paul had labeled it Winter 1994. The first picture was of me in a snowsuit standing next to Paul in front of our old mailbox. I had a bright smile, one mitten up in a half wave. I never questioned that photo before. But now I noticed something in the corner, a sticker on the side of the mailbox. A glittery unicorn. It shouldn't have meant anything, but I used to collect those. I used to line them up on my notebooks. I had never told Paul that. I put the album back and stood in the kitchen, not sure what to do next. That's when someone knocked. It was early evening. Sun just starting to dip behind the trees. I opened the door and saw a woman, maybe mid-40s, short hair coat, too light for the weather. She looked nervous. "Claire?" she asked. I nodded. "I'm sorry to just show up like this," she said, shifting her weight. "My name's Amy Callahan. I think I knew you when we were kids." I didn't answer right away. Her face wasn't familiar. Not completely, but there was something kind in her eyes. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. A photograph. A class picture. 20 kids standing in rows in front of a school banner that read Maplewood Elementary 1987. Amy handed it to me. "That's you," she said. I looked at the girl in the front row. Braids, red bow, slight smile. Scar on her elbow. It was like looking through a window I didn't know had been boarded up. Same eyes, same mouth. Same me. Amy's voice was low, almost like she was afraid of waking something. "You were my best friend. Your name was Clare Markham. You disappeared that summer." My mouth felt dry. I didn't say anything, just stared at the photo while her words echoed through the doorway. "They told us you died." I stepped back and closed the door gently. Amy didn't knock again. She left a napkin with her phone number on it, slid it under the mat. I stood in the living room for a long time with the picture still in my hand. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just looked. The name Maplewood Elementary meant nothing. The other children, their faces, their clothes, the way they stood, none of it stirred anything familiar. I might as well have been staring at someone else's childhood. But the girl was me. Paul used to tell me bedtime stories when I was little. Not the kind with dragons or castles, but quiet ones about the stars. He said people became stars when they disappeared. That's why they seemed so far away. I always liked that idea. The notion that someone gone could still be watching. I remembered asking once about my mom. I think I was 12. She couldn't stay, Paul had said, but she loved you. That's all you need to know. I didn't ask again. I trusted him. He wasn't warm, but he was consistent. He packed my lunches, taught me how to check oil in a car, took me to the county fair every July. I believed everything he said because there was no reason not to. No reason. Until now. I didn't sleep that night either. The house felt unfamiliar, even though I'd lived in it for decades. I kept waiting for a noise, a floorboard, a voice of memory, but nothing came. Just silence. Around 2 in the morning, I pulled out a box I hadn't touched in years. It was tucked in the back of my bedroom closet behind old coats and a stack of expired coupons. Inside, beneath some dusty greeting cards, I found a journal, leather-bound, worn at the corners. I opened it. No name inside. Just dates. The handwriting was Paul's. The first entry was from September 1994. Claire is adjusting well. Still quiet. But I'm told that's expected. I turned the page. She flinched when I dropped a glass in the kitchen. Loud sounds scare her. My hands trembled. Another page. She asked today why we don't have baby pictures of her. I told her we lost them in a storage flood. She seemed to accept it. Another, I feel like a criminal. My chest ached, but I kept reading. Page after page. Notes, observations. Guilt wrapped in tidy sentences. She talks in her sleep. Sometimes calls out for someone. I can't make out the name. I closed the journal and sat on the floor staring at nothing. All this time I thought I had no past. But the truth was, someone had taken it from me. I didn't know who yet, or why. But I was starting to realize I hadn't just forgotten. I'd been made to forget. The next morning I drove to the library. I asked the woman at the desk where to find public records. She pointed me to the basement archive room. I pulled census logs, school enrollment lists, birth certificates, anything with the name Clare Jensen. There was nothing before 1994, not one form, not one scrap of paper. It was like I'd been born at 11 years old. I sat at one of the old microfilm machines, surrounded by yellowed files and dust, trying not to let the tears fall. A librarian passed by. She didn't stop, but she glanced over and said gently, "Need any help?" I said it without thinking. I think I've been missing for a long time. She didn't ask what I meant, just nodded and walked on. I stayed in that room for hours. By the time I stepped outside, the light had shifted. The wind had picked up again. I got in my car and drove home, hands gripping the wheel tighter than usual. The sun was low in the sky, and there waiting on my front step was a box I didn't recognize. No return address, no markings. I parked, walked up slowly. When I picked it up, it was heavier than I expected, and when I shook it gently, something inside shifted like a stack of papers or cassette tapes. I didn't open it right away. I brought it inside and set it down on the kitchen table. Then I sat beside it, listening to the tick of the wall clock, wondering who had sent it and what else they knew. I sat with the box for nearly an hour before I opened it. The tape on the lid had yellowed at the edges like it had been packed years ago. There was no name, no return address, just the faint trace of an old shipping label that had been peeled away. I used the letter opener from the junk drawer and cut along the seam. Inside were 4 things: a manila envelope, a cassette labeled in blue ink, Claire, age 5, a folded drawing on crumpled construction paper, and a Polaroid I didn't recognize. I reached for the drawing first. It had the rough coloring of a child's hand, 2 girls standing side by side, one labeled me, the other Amy. The handwriting was backwards rounded in the way kids write before they learn better. Between them was a third figure taller with thick arms and a face scribbled out in black crayon. That part wasn't just crossed out, it was scraped so hard the paper had torn. I looked at it for a long time before I opened the envelope. Inside was another copy of the 2nd grade photo Amy had brought the same 20 kids lined up outside Maplewood Elementary, the banner flapping behind them. My name wasn't written anywhere, but I knew which girl was supposed to be me. It was in the tilt of her head, the eyes that didn't quite meet the camera. I thought about calling Amy. I hadn't saved her number, but I still had the napkin. I kept staring at the cassette tape. There was no date on it, no label beyond the name and age. I didn't own a cassette player. I couldn't remember the last time I had, maybe high school. I left the box where it was and went to bed, but sleep didn't come. I laid there for hours, eyes on the ceiling, fingers curled tight around the edge of the blanket. By morning, I knew what I needed to do. There's a thrift store in town that sells everything from chipped dishes to old radios. Whistle Stop Treasures. It's tucked between an auto parts shop and a shuttered diner with half the letters missing from its sign. I found a cassette player buried under a stack of rusted clocks. The woman at the counter looked at me with surprise when I set it down. "Haven't sold one of those in years," she said, running it over the scanner. "Funny little thing to be drawn to." I just nodded. I guess I'm trying to remember something. Back at home, I turned off the refrigerator so I wouldn't hear the hum, closed the blinds, sat on the rug with the box open beside me. The cassette clicked when I pushed it into the player. For a second, there was nothing but static. Then a woman's voice, soft, close to the microphone. "Okay, sweetheart. Ready." There was a shuffle. Then a child's voice, thin, high-pitched, began to sing. "Twinkle, twinkle, little star." I didn't need to hear more. It was my voice. I knew it in my bones. The woman sang along, gently, not in harmony, just with warmth. At the end, she laughed, a sound like wind through wind chimes. "That was perfect, Clary. Mommy's so proud of you." And then, quietly, "Say good night. Good night, tape." I hit stop. My hands were shaking. I didn't know the woman's voice, not really. But the love in it, the way it held the space around my name, I felt it deep in the center of my chest. I played the tape again, then again. I didn't stop until the batteries gave out sometime after midnight. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just listened. The laughter, the lullaby, that small goodbye. The next day, I found myself standing in the backyard holding the drawing in one hand and the photo in the other. The wind chime on the porch shifted in the breeze. I remembered I used to have dreams as a kid, always the same. I was in a car in the back seat, trees going by fast, my hand pressed to the window. Sometimes there was music playing, sometimes it was quiet. Then came the dark and cold. Paul told me they were just dreams, but now I wasn't sure. I finally called Amy. She picked up on the second ring. Her voice was calm, steady. "I was hoping you'd call," she said. "I need to show you something. We met at a cafe on the north side of town." It was late afternoon, warm light slanting in through the windows. She ordered tea. I got coffee. She reached into her bag and pulled out another piece of paper, another drawing. It was old edges worn, colors faded. "I found this in a box at my mom's place," she said. "You made it. That's me and you." "See?" I nodded. The third figure was there again. The same man. Again scratched out. Amy pointed to it. "You wouldn't say his name," she said quietly. "You said he was bad. That he made you leave." My throat tightened. "I think he took me," I said. She nodded. We didn't talk much after that. We just sat watching the steam rise from our cups. When I got home, I opened another old box from the closet, one I hadn't touched in years. It was filled with sweaters I hadn't worn since college. At the bottom in the corner was a bracelet. Threadbare. Rainbow-colored. I didn't remember keeping it. I didn't remember where it came from. But when I slid it on my wrist, it fit. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the man in the drawing, the one I'd erased. I remembered once when I was little, Paul had told me we don't always need to know where we come from. The past, he said, can weigh a person down. He meant it kindly. But now I wasn't so sure. I pulled out every yearbook I could find from Boulder public schools. Most were digitized. One had my face. Second grade. Clare Markham. Same photo Amy had shown me. I showed it to Natalie the next day. She's worked with me for 10 years at the clinic. She stared at it for a long time. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" she asked. I didn't know what to say, because I didn't know. I went to bed early that night, set the photo on the nightstand, left the cassette on repeat until I fell asleep. In the dream, I was back in the car. This time I turned and saw the driver's hands, large, pale, stained at the fingertips. He wasn't Paul, and I wasn't dreaming. I was remembering. The nights started to stretch out longer after that. I'd lie awake with the cassette player on the nightstand, the soft click of its motor running in the background, sometimes even after the tape had finished. It became a kind of anchor, not because it brought comfort, but because it reminded me the voice was real, that I had belonged to someone before Paul. But the voice didn't come with a face, and the memory didn't bring anything solid, just a shape in the dark, a sensation like something once held too long ago to describe. I didn't tell anyone at the clinic. I kept showing up each morning, answering phones, stocking supplies, calling out appointments like everything was fine. But I had started keeping a notebook in my bag. I filled pages with anything that surfaced: a word, a color, a sound that felt too familiar. I'd jot things down quickly, like I was afraid they'd vanish if I hesitated. The smell of cinnamon, the sound of a screen door, a green couch. I didn't know if they were memories or just tricks my brain had started to play on me. 2 days after meeting Amy at the cafe, she called. Her number lit up my phone and I didn't answer at first. Let it ring through once, but when it came a second time, I picked up. She didn't waste time. "I went through another box at my mom's," she said. "I found something, a drawing. It's of us. You labeled it, 'Me and Amy best friends forever.'" Her voice was steady but quieter than before. "There's someone else in it. Same man, tall, long coat. But this time you scratched his name out so hard it tore the paper. I think you were afraid of him." I sat down on the edge of the couch. "Can I see it?" she said. "I'm bringing it to you." That night the sky had that dull, heavy look it gets before snow. Amy arrived around 6, parked halfway up the drive. She stood on the porch for a second before I opened the door. We didn't hug. She handed me the drawing, folded once, careful not to crease the marks that were already there. I opened it slowly. 2 stick figures with red lines for hair. One had Amy written in green marker. The other was me. And then him, taller off to the side, face gone, just a black shape where the name had been. I stared at it for a long time. "I was scared of him," I said finally. Amy nodded. "You wouldn't tell me who he was. You just said he came from outside. I asked her if she ever told anyone." She shook her head. "We were 7. It didn't make sense to me. Then one day you were gone." I asked her if she thought he was real. Her answer came slower this time. "I didn't. Not back then. But now." She looked around the room, took in the photos on the mantel, the books on the shelf. "Now, I'm not so sure." After she left, I pulled out the journal again, the one Paul had kept. I reread the entries I'd already seen, then flipped to the back to see if anything was tucked in the pocket. There was nothing. But just seeing his handwriting again made something ache. I knew he had loved me. I didn't doubt that. He'd done the things good parents do, checked homework, packed lunches, told me I could be anything I wanted. But now I couldn't stop thinking about the things he didn't say. How when I asked about family, he'd give soft, vague answers. How he'd always avoided photo day at school. How he'd changed the subject when people asked where I was from. I wanted to believe he hadn't known, but part of me had stopped being sure. I found myself driving without a clear reason the next afternoon. I ended up at the public library again. Same archive room in the basement, same smell paper and dust and something old beneath it all. I looked up birth records again. Still nothing before 1994. I searched medical files, census lists, even newspaper announcements. Nothing. I sat back in the chair and stared at the screen. At some point, a librarian passed, same one from before. She paused near my table, offered a quiet nod, then moved on without saying anything. I stayed there until closing. When I got home, the porch light was already on. I almost didn't notice it at first, but something had been slipped into the mailbox. No stamp, no return address, just a photo and a small envelope inside. The photo showed a young woman in her 20s holding a baby. The back had 2 names written in faded pen, Leanne and Claire, 1982. My knees felt weak. I sat down right there on the front step. The woman had dark eyes, a round face, and tired arms that still looked steady. I didn't recognize her, but the baby. It had my ears, my chin, that soft swirl of hair near the temple that never grew flat. Someone had been watching me long enough to send that, long enough to know what it would do. I took it inside and placed it next to the journal. Didn't speak, didn't cry, just kept looking at the 2 names, Leanne and Claire. I had never heard him say her name. Not once. That night I found the basement door unlocked. It stuck sometimes, so I hadn't gone down in years. But now it was cracked open just enough to notice. I switched on the light and stepped down slowly. The air smelled of old wood rust and earth. In the far corner under a plastic tarp, I saw an old suitcase, brown leather scuffed at the edges. I bent down and unlatched it. Inside was a baby blanket, pale pink with satin trim, a child's shoe, a unicorn-shaped music box, and a worn page torn from a book titled The Story of You. I opened it. On the first page, in faded marker, were the words, "This book belongs to Clare Markham." Somewhere upstairs, a door creaked shut. I didn't move. I waited for footsteps, for a shadow, for a voice. Nothing came. When I finally stood up, the house felt different. Not dangerous, just heavier. Like it had started to remember things too. I brought the suitcase upstairs, set it near the couch. I didn't sleep, just watched the light move across the floor. Around 4 a.m, I opened the music box. The tune was slow, slightly off-key, but familiar. My hands began to shake. I remembered the sound, not just the melody, but the moment, the feel of warm hands tucking in a blanket, the smell of lavender, a kiss on the forehead. It wasn't a memory I could explain, but it was real, and it was mine. The next morning I called Amy again. "Can you come over?" I asked. She said she was already on her way. Amy showed up with 2 coffees and a folded newspaper under her arm. She didn't say much when she came in, just set everything on the kitchen counter and nodded toward the living room. We sat across from each other, the suitcase between us still open from the night before. I had laid out everything on the rug, the baby blanket, the shoe, the music box, the torn page from the children's book. Amy picked up the page carefully. She read the name at the top out loud like she needed to hear it spoken. "This book belongs to Clare Markham." She glanced at me. "So it really was you?" I nodded. There wasn't much left to say. We sat there in silence while the house settled around us. She stayed for a few hours that morning, asked if I wanted her help going through the boxes in the garage. Paul had always kept 4 of them locked under the workbench, each marked with just a single letter, L, M, C, and S. He told me once they were just tools he never got around to sorting. I never questioned it, but now I brought them into the house one at a time. The one labeled C was filled with drawings. Crayon scribbles, mostly rainbows, animals, letters half-formed. On the back of one, in a child's handwriting, "To Clary, love Mommy." Another showed a stick figure trio, me, Mommy, and Luca. I didn't know who Luca was. I wasn't sure I wanted to. I sat back and let the paper rest against my knee. The handwriting was mine, or at least it had been. That night I pulled out the cassette player again. let the lullaby play while I cleaned up the kitchen, folded the dish towel over the oven handle, rinsed the mug I hadn't touched. The cassette had started to feel like a ritual, something to hold on to while the rest of the world blurred. Before bed, I tucked the drawings into a folder and slid it onto the bookshelf between two novels I'd never finished. I wasn't ready to file them away with the rest. Not yet. The next day, I called the library again. This time, I asked about school records specifically from Maplewood Elementary in Boulder. The woman on the line said they didn't have direct access but suggested checking with Boulder's public archives. She gave me a number. I wrote it down but didn't call. Not right away. I spent the afternoon on the floor of my living room sorting through every loose photograph I could find. Most were from after 1995 school events, birthdays, holidays. Paul had orchestrated like clockwork. There were no baby photos, not one. But tucked behind a card in an old shoebox, I found a cassette labeled in the same handwriting as the others. This one read Clare, first recording. I didn't play it that night. I wasn't ready. The following morning, I made the call. Boulder Public Archives transferred me 3 times before I reached someone who could help. A man named Gerald. I explained that I was looking into an old school record from 1987, a second-grade class at Maplewood. He was quiet for a moment, then asked my name. I told him. He asked me to spell it. I did. There was a pause. Then he said, "We had a girl by that name. Missing case. July 1988. I said I knew. That I was trying to understand what happened. Gerald lowered his voice. "You're her?" I said I thought so. He asked if I had contacted law enforcement. I said, not yet. He gave me another number this time for the Helena Police Department. Said they'd want to speak with me directly. I hung up and stared at the phone for a long time before dialing again. The officer who answered took my name, asked me to hold. When she came back, she said someone would be in touch. The next morning, a detective named Rosa Mendes called. Her voice was calm, firm, but kind. She said she specialized in cold cases, that someone had passed along my information. She asked if I was safe. I told her yes. Mostly. She asked if I had time to talk. I said she could come by that afternoon. When she arrived, she wore plain clothes, dark slacks, a gray windbreaker, no badge showing. She carried a notepad and a small digital recorder. I made us both tea. She asked if she could record the conversation. I said yes. We sat at the kitchen table, light slanting through the blinds. She asked if I remembered the name Paul Jensen. I said of course. He raised me. "Do you know how he came to have custody of you?" I said. I didn't. "There are no adoption records," she said gently. "No court transfers. No guardianship files." I felt my breath catch. Rosa continued. "There's nothing official tying you to him until a school enrollment form in Helena in 1994. I nodded slowly. That would have been 6th grade. She asked if the name Lyle meant anything to me. I said it didn't. Then she asked again, this time more softly. "Lyle Creddick." The sound of it hit something inside me like a dull weight. I couldn't place it, but I flinched. I told her the name felt wrong. That night I got another envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a black and white photograph, young woman holding a baby. On the back, Leanne and Claire, 1982. The same names from the photo I'd been sent days before. Different pose. Same woman. This time her face was clearer. She had tired eyes, but strong arms. She looked like someone who held on too tightly for too long. I sat on the porch and stared at it until the sun went down. I didn't go back inside for a while. I stayed there until the streetlights blinked on and the sky turned the color of ash. When I did come in, the house was quiet. The cassette player sat on the windowsill. The suitcase still rested by the couch. I picked up the music box, turned the key, and let the tune play. Then I whispered the name Leanne. I wasn't sure who she was. but part of me wanted to believe she might know who I had been before someone decided I shouldn't remember. Detective Mendes called 2 days later. She asked if I could come to the station. Nothing formal, she said, just a chance to lay a few things out together. Her voice stayed level, but something about her tone made it feel more urgent than casual. I agreed to meet her that afternoon. Before I left, I tucked the photo of Leanne and me into the inside pocket of my coat. I didn't know if I'd need it, but I didn't want to leave it behind. The Helena Police Department was quiet when I walked in, just the low murmur of voices behind a partition and the rhythmic tap of fingers on keyboards. Rosa came out to meet me herself. She wasn't wearing a badge today, just a navy sweater, jeans, and the same watch I'd noticed before, scratched at the edges, like it had been worn through more than one chapter of her life. She led me down a short hallway into a small interview room. Nothing dramatic, no two-way mirror. Just a rectangular table, 2 chairs, and a box of tissues pushed to the side like someone thought it belonged there by default. She gestured for me to sit. "There's something we found," she said, settling across from me. Back in the original Boulder report, a neighbor on Maplewood Lane filed a tip in July of '88. She said there was a blue sedan parked near the Markham house most of that afternoon. Said the driver never got out, just sat there, engine running. I waited. Rosa continued flipping open a manila folder and pulling out a copy of the report. The description of the man matches Paul Jensen, mid-40s, heavy coat, kept his head low. I stared at the paper. "Are you saying Paul took me?" She didn't answer that directly. We don't know if he was acting alone or if he knew the full story. But there's reason to believe someone altered your records, Claire. Someone erased you. I felt something shift in my chest, not a crack, but a weight moving into place. I didn't speak. "Just let her keep going." "There's more," she said. "I spoke to a woman who used to report for the Boulder Herald. Margaret Doyle. She covered your case when it first broke. She's retired now, lives in Spokane. Spends her time scanning old files for a true crime blog. A few weeks ago, someone sent her that same footage from the parade. She reached out to me after recognizing your face. She still has all her notes. She's coming to town." I nodded slowly. Rosa folded her hands on the table. "Do you feel safe at home?" The question came softly. I had to think about it. "I think so," I said. "But I don't really know what that means anymore." That night I didn't turn on the cassette. I sat in the living room with the suitcase open again. I held the shoe in one hand and the unicorn music box in the other, but I didn't wind it. The silence felt more honest. I had started to understand that memory didn't always come back like a story. Sometimes it came in colors, in scents, in a pattern scratched into a wall. The next morning, the mail brought something new. A plain white envelope, no stamp, no writing. Inside, a single line typed on printer paper. "She's still alive. If you want the truth, go to the place with the unicorn." That was all it said. I read it twice before looking up as if someone might be watching through the front window. No one was there. I folded the note slowly and slid it into the same folder that held the photos. The phrase stuck with me all day, the place with the unicorn. I couldn't stop thinking about the stickers I used to collect. The ones I'd found on the mailbox in that old photo. The shape of the music box. The blanket. They weren't just decorations. They were a thread. I didn't know who had sent the note, but they knew enough to reach into the past I hadn't been able to touch. And they wanted me to go back. Not metaphorically, literally. Back to Boulder. Amy came by that evening. I showed her the note. She didn't question it. Just read it once and said, "We should go." I looked at her for a long moment. "You'd come with me?" She nodded. "I never stopped wondering what happened to you, and if there's a chance you'll find more answers out there. I want to be there when you do." We left the next day, drove through the night. I didn't pack much, just a few changes of clothes, the folder with the photos and letters, the tape, and the drawing of the man with the blacked-out face. The roads were mostly empty. The towns we passed were sleeping behind dark windows and single porch lights. Amy drove the first leg. I took over after midnight. The highway was long and flat and quiet. Somewhere outside Billings, I looked up and saw the moon through the windshield half hidden behind clouds. I remembered being small, sitting in the back seat of a car, my hand on the glass, the sound of tires humming against pavement, the scent of something warm and plastic and faintly sour old upholstery maybe. The memory didn't have shape, but it had weight. By morning, we pulled into Boulder. The town had changed, but not completely. The gas stations had newer signs. The coffee shops had been remodeled, but the trees still lined the streets the way I remembered seeing them in photos. We drove down Maplewood Lane slowly. I saw the house before Amy pointed it out. Smaller than I expected. White siding now freshly painted. New fence. But the layout was the same. The steps the way the porch sloped just slightly to the left. Margaret had made arrangements through a historical preservation group she worked with. They'd contacted the current owners, told them I was researching a piece about the neighborhood's history. It wasn't a lie. Not really. A spare key had been left for us under the mat. Amy stayed near the door while I walked through the front hall. The living room was staged but empty. No furniture that belonged to us. Just clean beige walls and a faint lemon scent from whatever had been used to mop the floor. I stood in what would have been my bedroom. The closet door creaked when I opened it. Inside, faint marks on the wall caught the light like someone had once scraped it with something sharp. At the base, near the floorboards, something caught my eye. I knelt down and pulled gently. A small, beaded bracelet, pink and purple, frayed but intact. I didn't remember losing it, but I remembered how it felt to wear it. In the backyard, the grass had grown over the old swing set, but the oak tree near the back fence was still there. Same trunk, same branches, same soft patch of dirt at the base. I didn't hesitate. I knelt and dug with both hands. My fingers hit metal 6 inches down. A lunchbox, rusted, dented. I opened it slowly. Inside, a drawing of a woman and child labeled Mommy and Me, a photo of a girl in a pink dress, and a letter written in clumsy handwriting. If someone finds me, please take me back to my mom. She has the pink house. I miss her. I sat back on my heels. Amy knelt beside me. You wrote that, she said. I nodded. I think I did. Behind us, the wind shifted. Leaves rustled in the branches above. And for the first time in years, I felt something settle. Not peace, exactly, but recognition. Like the ground itself remembered me. And somewhere, it had been waiting for me to come home. Back at the motel, Margaret was waiting. She had laid everything out on the bed before we even arrived. Photocopies, newspaper clippings, timelines, scribbled in pen, a binder thick with names and addresses. She greeted me like someone who had spent years chasing ghosts and finally found one sitting in front of her. "This is Lyle Craddock," she said, tapping the corner of a page that showed an older mugshot, grainy black and white, but the features were clear. Thick brows, hollow cheeks, eyes that didn't quite meet the lens. He was arrested in 1991 for child endangerment in Utah. Charges dropped. Disappeared. Before that, he worked for a private agency that supposedly handled child welfare cases, but the records are incomplete. And the agency was shut down for falsifying paperwork. I stared at the photo. Something about the slope of his shoulders felt familiar. I didn't say anything. Amy stood behind me, arms crossed, watching. Margaret kept going. We also found a file. A document with your name, Clare M., dated late 1988. It's vague, but it mentions a private arrangement. No judge, no notary, no legal signature, just a transfer form with a forged birth certificate. She laid that page beside the mugshot. The person listed as receiving custody? She paused. Paul Jensen. The silence that followed was long but not empty. It was the kind of quiet that fills a room when a truth that's always been circling finally lands. Amy reached for my hand, but I didn't take it. Not yet. So Paul knew I asked. Eventually, Margaret said, "We think he may not have known the full story at first, but we found personal letters, ones he never sent. They were in a storage unit he rented outside Helena. Notes, journal entries. At some point he realized you'd been taken, and he chose not to say anything." I nodded slowly. "He didn't hurt me," I said. "He wasn't cruel. He raised me." "I believe you," Margaret replied, "but kindness and truth don't always live in the same house." That night I couldn't sleep. I played the tape again, my voice at 5, the lullaby, the laughter that used to mean comfort. But it didn't feel safe anymore. It felt like a border, like a point in time someone had sealed off, never meaning for me to cross back through. The next day, Rosa drove into Boulder. She met us at the station, Amy, Margaret, and me. She looked tired but focused. She'd been following new leads ever since the lunchbox was uncovered. She handed me a folder. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "This came from one of Craddock's old properties," she said. "Abandoned trailer on the edge of town. It was condemned years ago, but there was a locked file cabinet left behind. We found your name on this." I read the heading out loud. "CLAM, hold for private arrangement, 1288. Rosa nodded. "It proves the transfer wasn't legal. He listed you like inventory." My stomach turned. I put the file back in the folder, closed it gently. "Do we know where he is now?" I asked. Rosa exhaled. "We might. There's a man living under an alias in Oregon. Sick. Bedridden. But the fingerprints match. It's him." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Rosa didn't press. "You don't have to see him. But you should know you were not the only one." I looked up. "What do you mean?" She reached into her bag and pulled out another envelope. Inside was a photo, another little girl, maybe 4 or 5, holding a unicorn plush, smiling at someone just out of frame. Rosa flipped the photo over. Scrawled on the back were 5 words. "She's not the only one." I stared at it. "Where did this come from?" "Your mailbox," she said. "Yesterday morning." Amy reached for the photo and turned it slowly in her hands. "That stuffed animal, she said I had one just like it." "You did too." Rosa nodded. "It was part of a limited run, only sold in a few states. We cross-referenced the year 1986 and narrowed it down." She pulled out another file. "There's a girl, Madison Riley, disappeared in 1989 from Salt Lake City, 4 years old, never found. Her mom said the only thing missing from the house was a unicorn toy." I held the photo between my hands. My fingers were trembling, but not from fear, from something else. Recognition, like some small piece of me had already known. "I want to meet her," I said. Rosa gave a small nod. "We'll reach out, see if she's willing." Later that night, I sat in the motel room while Amy slept on the other bed. The television was on mute, the light from it flickering across the wall. I took out the drawing I'd found in the lunchbox. Me and Mommy, the house with the pink shutters. A letter in big crooked letters asking anyone to help me find her again. My mom. Leanne. I whispered her name softly in the dark, just to hear how it felt. And then I turned to the window and watched the quiet outside for a long time, wondering if there were other little girls who had written letters like that, buried in soil somewhere still waiting to be found. Rosa arranged the meeting 3 days later. Karen Riley was 63 now, her hair gray at the temples, pulled back in a barrette face, lined not from age, but from years of searching. We met at a public library in a private meeting room, plain walls, quiet corners, a long wooden table under fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly when the silence went too long. She looked at me like she was trying to see something she wasn't sure would still be there. I brought the photo, the one of the girl with the unicorn plush. Karen stared at it for a long time before speaking. "That's the same toy," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "My daughter Madison. She took it everywhere, slept with it, wouldn't even eat breakfast without it in her lap. Her hand trembled when she reached out to take the photo. When she went missing, that was the only thing that disappeared with her." I nodded slowly. "Someone sent this to me," I said. "I think they want us to connect the dots." Karen looked up. "Do you think she's still out there?" "I think someone wants us to believe she is," I said. "And I think whoever took her is connected to the man who took me." Rosa sat quietly beside us, just listening, letting us speak in fragments, not pushing, not pressing. The grief in Karen's voice had settled into something quieter now. Not absence exactly, just space. Like a room that hadn't been entered in a long time but still remembered how to hold light. She asked if I remembered anything. I told her the truth. Not everything, but pieces. The sound of wind through a car window, the smell of eucalyptus. A voice humming from the front seat. "He never let me speak," I said. "Not in public. Not to strangers. He'd always say, 'Let me do the talking, Clary.'" Karen nodded. Madison had a small scar on her left temple from when she fell at the playground. "Did you ever?" She stopped. "I'm sorry. I don't mean to make this about me. It's not just about me," I said. "That's why we're here." That evening, back at the motel, Amy and I sat outside under a flickering porch light. It was warm out, the kind of Colorado evening that cools just enough to keep you alert. She handed me a folded piece of paper. "Found this inside one of the books we kept from elementary school," she said. "You wrote it." I opened it carefully. A note in uneven handwriting. "If I forget who I am, please help me remember." My eyes stayed on the words for a long time. "I must have known," I whispered. "Even then." Amy placed a hand on my arm. "You left a trail," she said, "even when no one was looking." The next morning, Rosa called again. She had news. "He's still alive," she said. "Lyle Craddock. Living under a different name in a small care facility outside Salem, Oregon. Advanced kidney failure. He's not mobile. Probably not much time left." I didn't say anything. She waited. Then she asked gently, "Do you want to see him?" "No," I said. But I didn't hang up. I don't want answers from him. Not really. But I want him to know I remember now. I want him to see my face. She said she'd make the arrangements. The building was small, tucked at the end of a quiet road behind a low iron gate. It looked more like a converted house than a hospital. I sat in the car for a while before going in. Just breathing. Just watching the breeze move through the tall grass beyond the parking lot. When I finally walked through the door, the nurse at the desk gave a nod of understanding. They knew why I was there. Rosa had already called ahead. I followed her down a short hallway lined with old landscape prints and soft green carpeting. The room was near the end, curtains drawn halfway, a low hum of oxygen filling the space. Lyle Craddock lay on a narrow bed, pale, gaunt eyes sunken into his face like the rest of him had been draining away for years. He looked up slowly as I entered. His eyes widened just slightly. "I know you," he croaked. I stepped forward, steady. "You don't know me," I said. "But I remember you." His lips parted, but no words came out. I moved closer. "You took me," I said. "You erased me. You put a price on a child's life and walked away." He blinked, coughed, turned his face toward the window. "I gave you a better life," he muttered. You sold me, I said, like an object, like I wasn't even real. I did what I was told, he said faintly. I did what I was paid to do. You ended lives, I said, and you don't even know their names. He didn't reply. I watched him for another moment, then leaned forward slightly. I'm not here to forgive you, I said. I just want you to remember that I made it out. I remember now. I found her again. And you didn't win. His eyes closed. I'm sorry, he whispered. I stepped back. Not enough, I said. And then I walked out. Amy was waiting for me in the parking lot. We didn't speak, just drove in silence, letting the wind through the window carry whatever it needed to. A week later, I met Leanne and Helena. She walked into the cafe with a look that was both hope and hesitation, like she'd spent years preparing for something she still wasn't sure was allowed to happen. We sat across from each other in the same booth where I used to get pie with Paul on Sundays. The space didn't feel heavy, it just felt real. Present. She talked first. About the years after I disappeared, the posters, the house sold to pay for private investigators, how she kept my room the same until she lost it all. I dreamed you'd remember me, she said, even just a little. But I knew that wasn't fair to ask. I shook my head. I don't remember everything I said, but I know who you are. Her hand reached across the table and I let mine rest over it. I want to start again, I said, if you're ready. I've been ready for 36 years, she whispered. That night I drew something. A new picture. A woman. A child. A swing set. A music box. A cat sleeping on a windowsill. A group of faces, Amy, Rosa, Margaret, Karen, even Paul. I put myself in the center, not the version that was taken, the one that came back. I signed it Clare Markham 2025, because for the first time that name felt like it belonged to me again. Winter came early in Helena that year. The first snow settled softly over the trees in my backyard, blanketing the grass in that quiet, deliberate way that makes the world feel smaller and still. I sat by the window, a cup of tea in my hands, watching the light fade behind the oak tree. The same one I used to sit under with the drawing, the music box, the pieces of myself I'd slowly been gathering. This time I wasn't waiting for something to surface. I was learning how to carry what had already returned. Leanne stayed with me for the holidays. She brought a box of old ornaments she'd saved, small things paper thin and faded but still holding their shape after all those years. We decorated the tree together, not as strangers trying to fix something broken, but as two people choosing to begin again. Amy came by with gingerbread cookies and a first-grade photo she'd found in a thrift store bin. Me arms folded, red sweater a little off-center, like I wasn't sure where to look. We laughed about how serious I looked, how I probably hadn't smiled much back then. Margaret sent a small glass ornament shaped like a typewriter tucked inside a card that simply said, "This one belongs to you." I hung it near the top of the tree. I visited Paul's grave on a cold morning just after New Year's. I didn't bring flowers. I brought a copy of the drawing I'd made, the one with everyone who'd helped me find my way back. I placed it at the base of the headstone and stood there a long time, not needing to say much. I wish you had told the truth, I said quietly. But thank you for keeping me alive. I didn't need him to answer. Some things only matter once they've been spoken. The Unicorn Project launched in February. It started as a folder on my desk, names, letters, messages from people like me, adults who'd never had birth certificates, mothers who still held on to drawings, women who couldn't remember why certain songs made them cry. We connected them with DNA Services legal guidance support teams. Some wrote back just to say thank you. Others didn't say anything at all. That was all right. Just knowing they were out there looking that mattered. Rosa called often. She said the investigation into Lyle Craddock's network had opened a dozen new threads. Some of the children were never found. Some likely never would be. But records were being uncovered, identities restored, and somewhere someone else had gotten a letter just like mine. She's not the only one. I think about that sentence more than I expected to. Not just the warning it carried, but the hope inside it too. That someone out there believed I could come back. That maybe we all could. I don't remember everything. Some memories stayed buried, some returned in pieces like rain on an old map. But I remember who I am. I remember who waited for me, and who never stopped saying my name. If this story stayed with you, consider sharing it so no name gets left behind.